Hello, everyone. Welcome back for episode 2. So, I wanted to just start. I've had really a lot of positive comments and messages about this. When I did episode 1 yesterday, I started by saying I have not seen the series that Candace Owens has done on this. And I have a very open mind as to, whether there's truth to what she's saying or not. The reason I'm looking at the lawsuit, and it's specifically the lawsuit, not the series from Candace Owens, is because that's how it should be in front of a jury. The jury would be expected to have not, followed Candace Owens, watched. There will be no expectation that they will have watched all the episodes she's put out and all the social media content she's put out about Brigitte Macron. The reason for that is, to eliminate any concerns or preconceived bias. So I've had a lot of people saying, I've had not a lot, I've had a couple of people saying, and there's no issue with this at all, it's a fair comment. So I'm kind of responding to that, just so everyone is aware that I'm covering this because I have not seen the series. I don't have a bias or an opinion going forth. And I don't need to watch it to comment on a lawsuit, because the Macrons will put forward their statements that they take issue with from the series, which they've done, and they link everything. When I look at Candace's response, she will come back, and, basically respond to those points, is what I expect her to do. She will have her own evidence. I'm looking at this from the perspective of, was there enough evidence for Candace Owens to have formed a reasonable belief in what she was saying? Because you can't just say something and then be like, well, it's my opinion. Right? I understand in the United States, you're entitled to protected opinion, and you have the First Amendment. That's absolutely fine. But these are that does not mean you can flat out say anything you like and cause, all these repercussions for another person, anyone, not just the president of France. I mean, any ordinary person as well, and be like, well, First Amendment. There are exceptions to the First Amendment, and defamation is one of them. So there has to be basis for believing that it's true. And that is where I am looking at this lawsuit. This is why I'm looking at this case. And I think actually the fact that I didn't follow Candace Owens in at least in this docu-series, because I have watched her stuff. It's not like I don't know who she is. And I like some of her stuff. There is stuff that I don't particularly like and don't align with, but there is stuff that I do like. So I'm kind of a middle ground person, but the fact that I have not watched this series particularly means that when I am looking at the lawsuit, I have not already formed an opinion, which would be largely based on just what Candace Owens has said. If I did, this is the Macrons putting across their perspective and their evidence, and it's important when we're critically evaluating the truth of a statement that we are not just listening to one person and favoring that person. We're actually looking at everything. I do it with all things. I did it with Lively and Wayfarer. Yes, I am very much on the side of Wayfarer, because there were problems with Lively's complaint from the start, and then the shady tactics and the lack of evidence. And there's been a lot of things that have got me to the point where I'm like, do you know what? I believe Wayfarer over Blake Lively, including personal experience of having to deal with her counsel. But I pride myself on being quite open-minded and being persuaded, and that is how the jury in a trial would approach this. And as a legal commentator, that's the fair way to do it. So I'm not missing anything because I don't feel like I'm missing anything because I haven't watched, all episodes and all the other content that Candace Owens has put out on Brigitte Macron. I will catch up with all of that after. But for now, I'm kind of okay with just, following the Macron's complaint and then Candace Owens' response, and then following that probably through to wherever it goes, whether it ends in a settlement, in a trial, or whether it's just, dismissed or withdrawn. However this lawsuit goes, I will be happy to follow it without having watched the series. Okay. So we did 2 hours. We got it to page 66 of over 250 pages. So we're going to I think I'm going to aim for another 2 hours here and then see where I am. I can see this going into an episode 3 and possibly even an episode 4. There's a lot. We're now in the interesting bit. We've got over the jurisdiction arguments and who the parties are and etc. etc. My attempt at pronouncing French names and places was devastating yesterday, and I believe it was Annie, Are You Okay? Compared me to the Friends episode of Joey Tribbiani attempting to learn French, which it made me laugh, but also it's absolutely true. So I do apologize if my pronunciation is just awful. I'm not trying to be deliberately bad. I'm not very good at French. If these were Welsh names and place names, I would have no problem. And I do think there's an argument to say that speaking Welsh is, it is arguably a harder language. But yeah, I suppose it adds to the comedy value a little bit as well. All right, so we had covered up to episode 3, up to and including episode 3 of the Macron's complaint against the series that Candace Owens had put out about Brigitte Macron becoming Brigitte. So we are now continuing now from episode 4. Okay. On February 11th, 2025, defendants released the next episode of the series titled Episode 4, Jean-Michel Trogneux. Defendants announced the episode on X, and then she says where the episodes can be found. Episode 4 was premised on Owens's false account of Jean-Michel's life and proof that Mrs. Macron was in fact Jean-Michel. Owens intentionally released episode 4 on Jean-Michel's birthday, saying, "Happy birthday, Brigitte." During episode 4, Owens made the following specific false and defamatory claims. Today is Jean-Michel Trogneux's birthday. In other words, happy birthday, Brigitte Macron, the First Lady, Brigitte Macron. Macron's immediate family was involved in helping people who had gender issues to become someone else. In other words, they were facilitating the issuing of real government IDs, which allowed people to legally shed themselves of their former identities and their true biological sex. We have to wake up to the fact that this is the reality of the world that we live in today. So what are the implications of that? But what we can't tell you is what exactly happened to André Louis Ozier. We cannot ascertain what happened to him based on the testimony of his first cousin, because it depends on whether or not you believe his partner, the woman who was at his funeral, who claimed that she found tickets to Africa in his pocket, that he had emptied all of his bank accounts. And if you potentially, or you could say, and if you believe the journalist from Paris Match, who then wrote that André actually spent the last days of his life in a psychiatric ward being guarded by none other than Alexander Benalla. With forgery, extortion, and most importantly, With access to a woman who can facilitate the changing of identities, it is not enough for any person investigating this case to ask questions like, is this Brigitte Trogneux in the wedding photo? Because we can confirm that is indeed a photo of a woman named Brigitte Trogneux in that wedding photo where that Brigitte is. Sorry, these are quotes, and we cannot confirm because the First Lady refuses to answer. She has a mother-in-law who helps transgender people get new identities. Again, I think I said this yesterday, but I believe that her mother-in-law works with intersex people, which is not the same as transgender people, which Candace Owens herself has said is not the same as transgender people. So you have to essentially understand that you can just take somebody's name. You can become somebody else at a moment's notice. Now, legally, when you become transgender, okay. This brings us to Jean-Michel Trogneux. If it's really you, Brigitte Macron, and you didn't take on the identity of your sister, if it's really you. The only question that remains is who the hell is Brigitte Macron? And the obvious answer to me, and after you see these photos that you are going to see, one in particular from when Jean-Michel Trogneux was 18, you're going to fall down like I did when I saw it. It's completely crazy. There's no question upon seeing this technology in my mind that Jean-Michel Trogneux is Brigitte Macron. The only question I have is what happened to his sister Brigitte Trogneux. Owens opened episode 1 with her central baseless narrative of identity theft. She declared today is Jean-Michel Trogneux's birthday. In other words, happy birthday Brigitte Macron, signalling to her audience that Mrs. Macron and her brother are the same person. She then teased an explosive photo of Jean-Michel to prove this claim but refused to show it. Owens questioned who the hell is Brigitte Macron before asserting that the obvious answer is Jean-Michel Trogneux. Owens continued, there's no question that Jean-Michel Trogneux is Brigitte Macron. The only question that I have is what happened to his sister, Brigitte Trogneux. She promised viewers more evidence about what happened to the real Brigitte Trogneux, but it never came. To further amplify her identity theft claims, Owens concocted a theory that Mrs. Macron gave an interview under the name Veronique, an openly transgender individual in 1977. Owens said that the voice was exactly the same as Mrs. Macron's according to an AI voice analysis. But Owens admitted that she doesn't know much about these softwares and provided no evidence that the analysis exists. Owens used this interview to bolster her claim that Jean-Michel transitioned to Mrs. Macron because Jean-Michel was married to a woman named Veronique. Owens described the marriage as only on paper and implying that it was a front for his transition. To make this claim, not only did Owens ignore publicly available videos and photos of Jean-Michel, including from President Macron's inauguration, but she also ignored facts from her own source. In his book, Poussard admitted the man seen at the inauguration is named Jean-Michel and lives above the Trogneux family shop in Amiens. Owens does not inform her audience of this fact because it entirely debunks her false narrative. Owens insisted that if Mrs. Macron didn't take on the identity of her sister, she would have answered basic questions, ignoring that those answers were in the December retraction demand. Owens closed episode 4 by continuing to build her false mind control narrative, citing the book Chaos about the Charles Manson murders and the CIA. She claimed these topics are very relevant to President Macron's story, reinforcing her defamatory suggestion that his identity and career are products of covert psychological manipulation. Displaying her true motive, Owens justified a request for donations with claims that she is risking her safety to protect children from predatory people like the Macrons. Okay. So episode 5. Who created Emmanuel Jean-Michel Macron? Okay. On February 13th, 2025, defendants premiered the next episode of the series titled Episode 5, Who Created Emmanuel Jean-Michel Macron? Defendants announced the episode on X and all the places the episode can be found. Episode 5 is premised on Owens's false and defamatory claim that Emmanuel Macron was specially selected and groomed to be the leader of France, so that an unknown secret group of elites could control him. During episode 5, Owens made the following specific, false and defamatory claims. This is a good time to tell you that most of what you think you even know about Emmanuel Macron thus far, his legacy. Yeah, it's just objectively not true. Emmanuel had a major hand up in life. This guy is so private we don't know much about him. What we do know about him is, I would say, quite sinister. It's quite sinister. It's making me think, I don't know, of that movie, The Manchurian Candidate. Brigitte Macron, perhaps, is Jean-Michel Trogneux. Who are you really, and what is your relationship to Emmanuel Macron? What is Emmanuel Macron's relationship to you? What is the relationship between Emmanuel Macron and Jean-Jacques? It's not feeling like a nephew to me. He's just a puppet, and he's been groomed from that time that he was a child. But groomed by who? Who is his father? Who is his father? He doesn't really seem to have close relations with his parents of these, his doctors. Perhaps they can't change identities and they can change identities and they can change names. This family has this capacity. There are too many similarities between the upbringing of Emmanuel Macron and, as we talked about, the upbringing of Kamala Harris, the upbringing of Barack Obama. You know, these people being raised by their grandparents at a time when we know the upbringing of Barack Obama, you know, these people being raised by their grandparents at a time when we know that the MK Ultra program was running, and there is something very, very wrong there. In episode 5, Owens doubled down on her most outrageous lies, painting the Macrons as criminal masterminds, propping up a false identity with forged photos and a fabricated past. She opened by claiming the images the public sees can't be trusted, because they were supposedly manufactured by a French public relations consultant, Mimi Marchand, who Owens insisted has an extensive criminal history and has been accused of many a forgery, many an extortion, and is in a lot of trouble right now. Owens embraced the false theory that President Macron is a modern Manchurian candidate, handpicked and groomed by shadowy elites. Owens stated, most of what you think you know about Emmanuel Macron is just objectively not true, and suggested that his entire life was staged for this role. Speaking directly to him, she said, "You know how to act and pretend that you are the president. Clearly somebody behind you has been moving you all through life." She tied this alleged grooming to the Rothschild family, a prominent Jewish banking family with historic influence in European finance, which has long been the target of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and harmful tropes. She told viewers she would not say much about the Rothschilds so the episode doesn't get hit on YouTube, but suggested they look up proven ties to Jeffrey Epstein and scandals involving paedophilia and incest surrounding them. Owens portrayed President Macron as a puppet groomed from the time that he was a child, questioning his family ties. Who is his father? He doesn't really seem to have close relations with his parents or his doctors, perhaps. They can change identities and they can change names. She framed his entire biography as part of a global operation steeped in perversion and pedophilia and grooming. Drawing false parallels with other leaders, she claimed there were too many similarities between the upbringing of Emmanuel Macron and Kamala Harris and Barack Obama, all supposedly raised during the era of MK-Ultra mind control experiments. Owens capped it off by escalating her incest narrative, turning directly to Mrs. Macron. Who sanctioned these lies in the press? What is Emmanuel Macron's relationship to you? What is the relationship between Emmanuel Macron and Jean-Jacques? It's not feeling like a nephew to me. She then flatly lied. They won't answer that. In truth, the Macrons unequivocally denied the incest claim in their December retraction demand. So, I think what I might do, if the December retraction demand is filed and it's not under seal, is once I've covered this complaint, is I might then look at that. Because if the Macrons have answered all of this and Candace Owens is saying, on a platform, they're refusing to answer, then that does raise questions. However, it also, for balance here, if the Macrons are saying we answered all of this in this December retraction demand and the answers are actually not there, then that raises questions about what they're saying. December 6th, Candace Owens, Xavier Bouchard. On February 17th, 2025, defendants launched episode 6 of the series titled Candace Owens x Xavier Bouchard. Defendants announced the episode on X. The first 20 minutes of the episode are available on various platforms, but the remainder is exclusively accessible on CandaceOwens.com, allowing Owens to avoid other platforms' content moderation policies. Episode 6 features an interview by Owens of Bouchard, her primary source. Despite knowing that Bouchard walked Ray and Roy into defamation liability in France, Owens decided to air Bouchard's false claims not once but twice to a global audience and expand upon them. Owens told the world she was releasing episode 6 because the Macrons sent her a retraction demand, proving her motive is revenge, not the truth. During episode 6, Owens made the following specific, false, and defamatory claim. I think a year from now, most of the world will be awakened to the fact that what I said 1 year ago is true. I believe that Emmanuel Macron is a homosexual man that was groomed from his youth. I believe the individual who groomed him is now his wife. I believe that his wife was born Jean-Michel Drognon and transitioned in his early 30s. And I believe that the entire state is colluding to protect that secret. And like I said, I would stake my entire professional career on all of those points. Defendants published several false and defamatory X posts in support of episode 6. In those X posts, Owens made the following specific, false and defamatory claims. Emmanuel Macron married a man, which was illegal at the time that he did it. Okay. And there's that post. I will say these two photos I have seen, right? And I absolutely agree. They look very similar. But also, they're siblings. If I put a picture of me and my youngest brother together, side by side, we look very similar. We both look like our dad. That's when I say, if this kind of evidence in itself, on its own, is for me, it's not enough. Because, it's not unusual for siblings to resemble each other. However, they do look very similar. And I'm also open to the idea that Candace Owens had far more than photos side by side. I would be very surprised if she ran with this based on photos alone. But I'm sure we will get to what further evidence she presented eventually. Okay. Why did he send me the legal letter? 1, because Brigitte can still be prosecuted for this crime against a minor up until the end of this year. 2, because his marriage was an illegal act. Emmanuel Macron broke the law when he married his groomer. And there's that post. In episode 6, Owens and Poussard laid out their full conspiracy theory, anchoring their defamatory claims with manufactured evidence. They alleged, without a credible basis, that Mrs. Macron is actually Jean-Michel, born male, who later committed incest with President Macron, who himself, they claim, is a product of a mind control program and a Manchurian candidate. They further asserted that the Macrons conspired to manipulate the media, falsify records, and use state power to suppress the truth. Owens presented this narrative as fact, not opinion, despite knowing its utter falsity. To bolster these outrageous claims, Owens and Poussard obsessed over Mrs. Macron's childhood photos, asserting without proof that images were doctored to hide her true identity. Poussard claimed a young Jean-Michel was airbrushed out of the family photo, though neither he nor Owens pointed to a single source. Owens dismissed the 2021 Daily Mail debunking article by saying she did not need to understand the theory about Mrs. Macron's biological sex. She could just see Mrs. Macron was actually Jean-Michel. When confronted with the First Communion photo, which undermines her theory, Owens shrugged off reality, claiming it was too modern and had simply been colorized to look older, an assertion she previously contradicted after receiving the December retraction demand. Owens further downplayed the wedding photo, claiming it was not of Mrs. Macron, without providing an alternative explanation. Her confidence is based not on facts, but on a determination to stick to a false but sensational narrative. While discrediting the publicly available photos disproving their thesis, Owens and Poussard alluded to other photos that support their claims without showing them to the audience. Poussard claimed to possess photos that would prove Mrs. Macron is Jean-Michel and that the real Brigitte no longer exists. But he never produced them. They similarly claimed that Jean-Michel is not the man from the inauguration video, but never provided their proof or an alternative explanation. Owens asked, "Where is the real Brigitte Journoud today?" They concocted a fiction that Jean-Michel assumed his sister's identity in 1986 and married President Macron under this false persona, committing identity theft. Unsurprisingly, despite admitting she actually existed, neither Owens nor Poussard explained what happened to the real Brigitte Journoud. Owens then escalated the rhetoric to claim that France is run by a deranged homosexual with his child victim, accusing Mrs. Macron of criminal conduct and suggesting that President Macron is the abused child. She pushed further by suggesting that the Macrons are related by blood and committing incest based on a perceived facial resemblances between President Macron and Mrs. Macron's nephew, Jean-Jacques, whom Poussard falsely claimed may be Mrs. Macron's child. Owens and Poussard agreed that there is a secret group of criminal elites controlling President Macron. Poussard stated, "It's time we ask ourselves the question, are these young leaders being engineered and controlled by blackmail?" Owens endorsed this claim, telling her audience, "I do think, and this is rather conclusively, that the world is sort of waking up to this concept that leaders are selected and primed and groomed and sort of inserted into powerful positions." She linked this theory directly to Mrs. Macron, including, "This is kind of the same thing with Brigitte Macron." Poussard noted that the Macron's marriage is fraudulent and that France has placed in power a couple whose entire identity is based upon a fraudulent construct, forgery, pedophilia, and the abuse of a minor. To explain why this dark family secret has remained secret thus far, Owens and Poussard accused the Macrons of abusing the French Secret Service and judiciary to silence critics. Owens even asked whether Poussard fears for his life, suggesting that the Macrons are willing to kill to protect their fraudulent construct. The epilogue. Defendants released the last episode of the series titled The Epilogue on February 20th, 2025. During the epilogue, Owens told her listeners that in all the previous episodes she had stuck strictly to the facts. Defendants announced the episode on X, and then it lists where you can find the episode. The epilogue is premised on Owens's false and defamatory claim that a family member molested President Macron and that the President and Mrs. Macron are committing incest. Owens linked these false and defamatory claims of molestation and incest with equally false claims that the Rothschild, Trogneux, and Macron families are intertwined blood relatives. During the epilogue, Owens made the following specific false and defamatory claims. "I know there are so many lingering questions. Is Brigitte Macron the First Lady of France, Emmanuel Macron's biological father? We're hearing that a lot. Where is the real Brigitte Trogneux?" Okay, so many of you had suspected that these families might all be related. Are the Oziers, the Trogneux, and the Macrons all just from the same family? Is there a chance that Brigitte Macron, some of you asked, is actually the father of Emmanuel Macron? We definitely know and have confirmed, like we did in the last episode, that he had his hand held through his career by David de Rothschild, a family that is known and is on record as having practiced incest. Okay, why and how did Emmanuel Macron get so close to the Rothschilds? So close that his colleague and this dude didn't even know what EBITDA meant. I don't know what that means. And yet he became the youngest managing partner. We understood that whatever it was David Rothschild was holding his hand, he just wouldn't answer the question that he was being given, and we would laugh at him in meetings because he knew nothing about finance. Why did David Rothschild see to it that Emmanuel had his hand held? Vice is nice, but incest is best because it stays in the family. That is a direct quote from David de Rothschild's cousin, Natalie Reams Rothschild. Then there was a biography which was written by author Natalie Livingston, which was entitled The Women of Rothschild, which sort of revealed the maniacal desire that the Rothschild family had to maintain their fortune and their power in the world. A desire that was so maniacal that they practiced family incest. That is just undeniable. It is a fact. Okay, and allegedly they did this only until it was no longer socially acceptable. Right up until the late 19th century. You guys, right before we got into this Trogneux family. It's just amazing. Yes, I agree with those of you that are commenting right now that we are looking potentially at incest. That is what in my gut feels it has to be a secret so big that it would make them react in this way, because it is a type of violence to treat journalists like this. It is a kind of emotional violence to do these sorts of things, and they do it as though they know that vice is nice but incest is best and things should be kept within the family. Wow, that was a lot. Defendants published a false and defamatory ex-post in support of the epilogue, in which Owens made the following specific false and defamatory claims. Is Brigitte Macron President Macron's father? What happened to the real Brigitte? In the epilogue, Owens explicitly accused Mrs. Macron of an identity swap, falsely claiming that the Élysée Palace refused to confirm recent photos of Jean-Michel Trogneux as the same person pictured in a 1953 family photo from Amiens. This is demonstrably false. The Macrons explicitly confirmed his identity in their December retraction demand, a section Owens herself read aloud in episode 1. Later, while reviewing the inauguration footage, Owens repeated that they won't answer for sure whether the man shown is Mrs. Macron's brother, ignoring that the Macrons had already provided her with the footage and stills affirming it is Jean-Michel. She bolstered the identity theft claims by stating that the family could destroy identities and create identities using shared names to make it very easy to move throughout the family and share identifications. Owens urged viewers to come forward with any information about the mystery of Brigitte Trogneux's whereabouts, asking whether she was given a different name or died young after having children. Yet again, Owens raised incest claims precisely because she knew how outrageous and sensational the claims were. She deliberately appealed to prurient interests to draw attention and boost her audience, exploiting shock value to keep viewers engaged. Owens asserted a key takeaway from the series was that Mrs. Macron may be President Macron's father. She speculated that the Rothschild and Trogneux families are connected, explaining President Macron's promotion at Rothschild Bank, and concluded, without basis, that we are looking potentially at incest. To reinforce this, she claimed Jean-Jacques Trogneux looks almost identical to President Macron, again implying a hidden family relationship. She declared the series will remain free because how could you talk about a story that involves incest and children and the criminal activities of government and put it behind a paywall? Owens promoted Prasard's Becoming Brigitte book as containing way more pedocriminals than the series, indicating to her audience that she has even more evidence against the Macrons if only they buy the book. Owens took her final jab at President Macron, accusing him of lying about his origins, claiming they're not actually his mum and dad. Yet again, she cited his parents' professions, a psychiatrist father and pediatrician mother, as evidence of deliberate identity manipulation, again pushing the false narrative that President Macron's entire life is staged. Owens ended with a direct inflammatory call for President Macron's removal. Emmanuel Macron, you have lied repeatedly to the French people. You have harassed journalists. You are a monster, and not a monster of your own doing. You were targeted when you were a child, and what you have done is unforgivable as a leader. She dismissed his authority. It's just ridiculous to pretend that he has any power. Whatever shadow is behind you, fly it over so they can have a conversation with President Trump. Owens concluded, we know you were created. You are not real. You have no thoughts of your own. You are the Manchurian candidate, and you have absolutely no power. She tied this alleged manipulation back to Mrs. Macron, accusing her of grooming President Macron into a psychopathic figure who enjoyed harming people. Wow, that was a lot. Okay. The Macrons send a final retraction demand, putting defendants on notice of the false and defamatory claims in the series. Okay. Even after the series concluded, Owens continued to exploit the Macrons for content. As detailed below, she repeated her claims in interviews with other podcasters. She insisted that Mrs. Macron was a man whenever the Macrons appeared in the news. She publicized President Trump's request for her to stop spreading the rumors and falsely claimed that President Macron refused to help and falsely claimed that President Macron refused to help end the war in Ukraine until Owens stopped speaking about Mrs. Macron. She falsely tied President Macron to Jeffrey Epstein. Owens was relentless. On July 1st, 2025, the Macrons sent the July retraction demand, this time addressing the false and defamatory statements from the series. The July retraction demand referenced and incorporated the December and February retraction demands and explicitly stated that Mrs. Macron has always been a woman, she is not President Macron's blood relative, and President Macron was not involved in a mind control program. Furthermore, it stated that these truths completely invalidate Owens's false claims. Yet again, rather than retracting her claims or simply refraining from commenting, Owens decided to use the July retraction demand for content. Owens lied to her audience and stated that the Macrons had never told her they were not blood relatives. She then read her audience the list of false and defamatory statements included in the appendix to the July retraction demand. Next, defendants published the July retraction demand and its attached appendix to CandaceOwens.com. Owens made her refusal to retract clear, stating, "We are not getting in line. We've said, file your lawsuits, my friend." Owens then claimed the July retraction demand was the result of the Macron's law firm just running up the tab and taking their money and lying to them about what defamation means in America. Lying to them, maybe it is that the law firm being sleazy and running up the tab. The Macrons never received a direct response to the July retraction demand. The Macrons filed this action against defendants Owens. The Macrons filed this action against defendants. Owens responds by tripling down and launching season 2 of the series. The Macrons filed their complaint in this action on July 23rd, 2025, once again putting defendants on notice of the falsity of their claims and the publicly available evidence disproving it. Without missing a beat, Owens tripled down. Defendants republished Owens's season 1 of the series and described its claims as the truth. The very day the Macrons filed this action, defendants released episode 218 titled Break-In. Brigitte sues me for defamation. The cover image for the episode stated, "This took balls." I appreciate the humor. Defendants announced the episode on X and all the places you can find the episode. Episode 218 includes Owens' reaction to this action. Owens opens the episode by playing a clip from the Gladiator movie and asking her audience, "Are you not entertained?" See, and just from a comment perspective, again, neutral, but in a lawsuit, you know, when you're one of your defenses, one of Candace Owens' defenses will be that she believed the truth of her claims and she felt it was important to share that truth, you know, and she's made reference to wanting to protect people from predators in her words, like the Macrons. But when you throw in statements like, public statements as well, saying, "Are you not entertained?" that kind of takes away the seriousness of what you're claiming to be doing, and that can harm a defense. Just a small observation there. During episode 218, Owens repeated her prior false and defamatory claims, calling Mrs. Macron a very goofy man and claiming she has definitely got balls. Owens proclaimed the truth of her statements in the series, stating that you only have to get one episode into that thing to know these are not outlandish allegations. Owens stated that this action was further proof that Brigitte Macron is definitely a man. Owens repeatedly referred to Mrs. Macron's alleged penis and called her a creepy old man. Owens made it clear that she would not back down from her false claims and displayed ill will towards Mrs. Macron, stating, "I'm getting really sick of Brigitte Macron and the BS here that has just been flying everywhere from France to America, protecting what I view to be a sadistic syndicate. I said what I meant, and I want to be also clear. I think you're a man. I think it's beyond obvious that you were born a man. You may want to split hairs about, well, I'm really a woman, and I feel on the inside I'm a woman. An insulting wig that you're wearing, it's ridiculous. It's like you're laughing at us. Okay? You can try to split hairs and how you feel and how you've always felt like a woman. What I'm saying is that you were born a man and you will die a man. That's the point I'm making." Okay. On July 24th, 2025, defendants released episode 219 titled "Whoa, Trump named in Epstein Files. Becoming Brigitte goes international." Defendants announced the episode on X, and there's all the places you can find it. And they have to list that each time, all the places that the episode is located. They have to list that for the court's benefit. In episode 219, Owens repeated her false and defamatory claims that the Macrons were involved in incest. She explained to her audience that her false claims regarding the Macrons are not only entertaining but also the truth. Owens told her audience that Mrs. Macron would have defeated Owens in the court of public opinion if the truth was on his side, but it's not. Owens reiterated that she was challenging the Macron system of lies and corruption. She claimed again that one simply must watch one episode of the Becoming Brigitte series because there is so much proof. Nobody comes out of that thinking that Brigitte Macron was born a woman. I'll tell you that for free. Owens then promises that she's going to do a Becoming Brigitte season 2 because that is exactly what happens when you try to bully her with finances. Okay. Owens repeated her false claims on X that the Macrons are lying about Mrs. Macron's identity, despite the Macrons denying those claims in this action. On July 28, 2025, defendants released episode 220, titled "Exclusive, Brigitte Macron's Lawyer Has a Dark Past." Dan Bongino speaks out. Defendants announced the episode on X and all places you can find the episode. In episode 220, Owens started out by promising her audience that she was definitely telling the truth. Owens claimed the Macrons sued her because she was getting close to finding out. All of it's really connected. Epstein, Brigitte, Ghislaine. She repeated her false claims that President Macron is being controlled by the Rothschilds, stating that President Macron has absolutely no power to do anything that the Rothschilds do not want done. If you have not figured this out yet, Macron is not in control of anything. He has no power. He's never had power in his entire life. She followed up by referring to Mrs. Macron as President Macron's husband. Owens further reiterated that all she has done is tell the truth about their past. Okay. On July 29th, 2025, defendants released episode 221 titled Brigitte Presents Proof Her Brother is Alive. Defendants announced the episode on X, all the places that the episode can be found. In episode 221, Owens repeated her false and defamatory claims that the Macrons are lying about Mrs. Macron's identity, calling her a quote-unquote mother. She asserted that Jean-Michel was curiously missing and cited Chinese software as stating that Mrs. Macron is this little boy in the photo. Owens further alleged that Jean-Michel Trogneux took Brigitte Trogneux's identity at some point. It's very obvious he kind of becomes his sister. That's what seems to be the most logical conclusion based off of everything. She added that Mrs. Macron was part of a network of people that are willing to give IDs. It's kind of Mimi Marchand. Like, she was fashioning IDs, getting IDs. She's being accused of forgery and things of that nature. The real Brigitte Trogneux did her brother a favor and allowed him to become her. Again, that's my theory. Owens also repeated the false and defamatory allegation that President Macron was intentionally groomed for a position of power. Finally, Owens told her listeners, "There is so much more. I've been very honest and serious when I said to you guys our Becoming Brigitte series barely scratched the surface. We left so much on the table, we didn't want to overwhelm viewers. It's just so sick and sadistic, and it's such a web." Owens proclaimed yet again that she is telling the truth. On July 31st, 2025, defendants released episode 222 titled First Epstein, Now Diddy, What is Donald Trump Thinking? Defendants announced the episode on X, all the places it can be found. In episode 222, Owens clarified that she wants this action to go all the way. On August 1st, 2025, Owens appeared on the Tucker Carlson show to discuss this action. That same day, defendants reposted the episode on X. On August 4th, 2025, defendants posted the episode again, celebrating that it had already reached over 3 million views. All the places that the episode can be found. Okay. In the Tucker Carlson interview, Owens discussed this action and repeated her false claims about the Macrons. During the interview, Owens repeated her false and defamatory claim that Mrs. Macron was born a man named Jean-Michel Trogneux. Owens repeated the false and defamatory claim that the Macrons abused their power to harass the journalist that got wise to the fact that Brigitte Macron kind of didn't exist for 30 years. She also repeated the false and defamatory claim that President Macron was told to pretend that he's the president of France, and somebody behind him is telling him what to do. These people are not in real control, and that they're just made to kind of delude the public into believing that, this is a republic and a democracy, and you have a say, and look, you elected this person, but somebody else is obviously pulling the strings. Lastly, she forcefully and unambiguously stated that she certainly did not want to have the case dismissed. Okay. On August 4th, 2025, defendants released episode 223 titled Tucker Carlson and I discuss Brigitte's genes and Trump commits treason. Defendants announced the episode on X, all the places it can be found. In episode 223, Owens continued to proclaim that she was speaking the truth and that it's not just what she revealed on the series. She barely scratched the surface. Owens presented herself as just a mother who cares deeply about children being victimized and the idea that victimization could be systemic and the government could collude to cover it. And that's what I mean. That's kind of the contrast when I said earlier, her defense and is going to be that her belief. There may be other, evidence that she points to, but she's going to say, well, I believed it based on XYZ. And then she's going to also say, I was concerned. I wanted to protect people. But then when you also make statements such as is everyone entertained, it takes away from the seriousness of your concern. On August 5th, 2025, Defendants released episode 224, titled What Does Israel Have on Trump? Defendants announced the episode on X, all the places you can find it. In episode 224, Owens yet again emphasized that if you say that you don't think Brigitte Macron is a man, she has to accept that you didn't watch the series. She barely scratched the surface. It's unbelievable. On August 6th, 2025, Defendants released episode 225, titled Yes, Trump Will Pardon Ghislaine Maxwell. Defendants announced the episode on X, all the places it can be found. In episode 225, Owens repeated the false and defamatory claims that Brigitte Macron is a male and that they will not be presenting any evidence to the contrary because they would have done it already. She also repeated the false and defamatory claim that the Macrons were abusing their power to engage in a cover-up, stating the Elysee Palace was plucking off journalists, going after journalists who were trying to get out the truth. Owens claimed that the Macrons are part of the real corruption and real evil. Owens stated that the evidence of her claims is so overwhelming, and it's ridiculous that other journalists would not be jumping on this and telling the story. On August 7th, 2025, Defendants released episode 226, entitled Insane Update, Brigitte, Blake Lively, and the Globalized Press. The cover image for the episode was captioned with tampering with evidence and featured an image of Mrs. Macron. Defendants announced the episode on X, all the places you can find it. In episode 226, Owens repeated the false and defamatory claim that Mrs. Macron was her brother, Jean-Michel, based on the sheer size of Brigitte's hands. The one thing you can't operate on. Owens continued, that is a very large hand for a madam. Or madame. Owens then alleged that Mrs. Macron's relatives were fabricating publicly available evidence that disproved Owens' claims, such as Mrs. Macron's birth announcement. But wasn't that circulated years before in the Daily Mail? Owens ended by falsely accusing the Macrons of targeting her because of her race, stating, "So truly, F you, Brigitte and Emmanuel, you've sickened me." I mean, the idea that you could do this, that this is what you're doing, it's a wave whip. It's a slave whipping. Just admit it. It's a slave whipping. Little Rowdy, what do you guys used to do, right? When you guys see black and brown people, you're like, well, we're down in Algeria just doing stuff. No, not happening here, sorry. Okay. On August 11th, 2025, Defendants released episode 227, titled Breaking News, the Macrons hired a detective to investigate me. Defendants announced the episode on X, places you can find it. In episode 227, Owens told her audience and the Macrons that there was a very clear and convincing reason why I got involved in this case. It's fun to do bad things, right? And when you said nobody could talk about this and you started going for journalists, I was like, I don't know, it's fun to do bad things. I kind of want to do a little hood rat stuff with my friends in the basement. That's what we're doing here. Do you know this doesn't make bloody sense? We're doing hood rat stuff with our friends in the basement, and you can put me under oath. I will testify no one else was involved. Owens continued to repeat the false and defamatory claim that the Macrons were fabricating evidence, stating, "What's crazy is that they are producing as evidence in the lawsuit photos that we know are fake." And unless Candace Owens is paid for an expert to verify that, her word is not enough. That's just how it is. Like that, her saying, her kind of trust me, bro, is not enough to verify things, as truth or as fake. People will know this. Like when we had Claire Ayub's recording of Steve Sauerwitz in the Lively case, a lot of people ask me, "Oh, well, do we have metadata? How do we know this wasn't clipped?" People asking questions, how do we know that this is true? But and that's fair enough, and that's absolutely right. And Steve Sarowitz in that case, as he was the one who had the conversation and was being recorded, would have been the one to say, "Oh no, she skipped a part. There's a bit missing. There's a part where I said this and she said that, and that is not on that recording. Where is it?" So he would have been the best person to kind of raise a flag if there was a problem with the recording. But here, someone can't just say, with no skill, qualification, or knowledge of how to do this, someone can't just deem photos to be fake. They have to be independently verified as fake by someone who is, sufficiently qualified and experienced. And that's where you slide into problems, when you're sort of saying these things and if you don't have that kind of evidence to back that up. Because if these photos are now verified and they are real, then, well, Candace Owens just saying, "Well, I didn't think they were real," is not quite enough. It's not enough. Okay. Owens continued to repeat the false and defamatory claim that the Macrons were fabricating evidence, stating, "What's crazy is that they are producing as evidence in the lawsuit photos that we know are fake." Owens has not provided any proof for these claims. Exactly what I just said. Owens continued repeating the false and defamatory claim that Brigitte Macron lived as Jean-Michel. And I will just say, right, whilst it sounds like I'm being critical of Candace Owens, I'm not trying to be. What I'm trying to do is say, well, actually, this is kind of, the legal yardstick. And I will do the same with any response, towards the Macrons, with any response from Candace Owens. If Candace Owens makes a good point and says, well, hold on, the Macrons are saying this, but they've not provided evidence, I will also say that. Someone said to me in one of the comments yesterday, well, surely this could all be cleared up if Brigitte Macron just provided a DNA test. And I absolutely agree with that. Yes, she could. What I could see happening here is two things. Is one, why should she? Right? It is definitely the easier option, but also DNA is protected. You can't just demand it from someone. But also, two, someone, even if she provided the DNA test and it proved that she was a woman, there were still going to be people who believe this so much to the exclusion of any evidence to the contrary that they will just say, "Oh, well, someone else, that's a fake sample. She got someone else to provide a sample." There will always be people countering the arguments. But my opinion is definitely, well, this could have been done and dusted if, DNA test was provided. I don't know whether that's been offered or it's on the table. It may be. I don't know. I'm just reading this complaint, but it seems the obvious solution here. Okay. On August 14th, 2025, Dependents released episode 228 titled Emmanuel Macron Had a Sugar Daddy. Kanye drops a documentary. Dependents announced the episode on X, where you can find it. In episode 228, Owens repeated the false and defamatory claim that Mrs. Macron was Jean Michel. Owens told her listeners that people are paying extra attention and freaking out because Mrs. Macron's sister and niece had recently passed away. Owens implied that their deaths were part of a cover-up because Mrs. Macron's niece may have been the youngest child in the 1953 Trognon family photo. She continued, "It, of course, is interesting because, had those two individuals been alive, we may have liked to subpoena them." On August 18, 2025, Dependents released episode 229 titled Drama Club Reunion. Macron, Zelensky, and House in Habit are back. Dependents announced the episode on X, where you can find it. In episode 229, Owens repeated the false and defamatory claim that Mrs. Macron is lying about her identity by asking the question, does she stand when she pees? Owens further stated that she was not letting this go. On August 19, 2025, Dependents released episode 230 titled President Macron Gives His Victim Impact Statement. Dependents announced the episode on X. The episodes can be found in all these places. In episode 230, Owens repeated that Jean-Michel is missing and falsely theorized that he may have been part of the Stanford prison experiment before he took Mrs. Macron's identity. Owens also questioned whether the United States government might be involved in covering up Jean-Michel's alleged transition. Owens stated in part, because we just don't know where Jean-Michel went. We don't know what he was doing in the military. We don't know why. Also, the United States government is not getting involved here and telling Emmanuel Macron to go away. Do they know something? These demonstrably false claims repeat and build on the false claims in the series that the Macrons are lying about their identities and engaged in identity theft. On August 20th, 2025, Dependents released episode 231 titled The Most Moral Blackmail in the World. Dependents announced this episode on X, all the places it can be found. In episode 231, Owens announced that she was launching season 2 of the series because the Macrons filed in this action. Specifically, Owens stated, "We are now ready to begin Becoming Brigitte season 2. I think it's now the right time. So much is happening in this moment. And also because, that part of them filing this lawsuit was to intimidate me, was to silence me. And I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm not going to be silenced. I'm not going to be fearful of perverts that have power." Owens promised that there would be more explosive realizations, that the story gets crazier every day. And one issue I do have with that suggestion that the lawsuit was filed to intimidate us, she actively encouraged them to file a lawsuit. So I don't see how she can claim that they only did it to intimidate and silence her, when actually it's had the opposite effect anyway. She has not stopped talking. There's nearly daily episodes on this now from the point of the lawsuit being filed, but she was almost goading them into filing it. And I think even at one point said, "If you don't file it, I will." So I'm not sure. I feel that's a bit contradictory to then say they filed the lawsuit to intimidate and silence her. Again, just an observation. On August 21st, 2025, Dependents released the episode 232 titled Breaking News, Jean M. Trognon found in the United States in the 60s. Dependents announced the episode on X, all the places you can find it. In episode 232, Owens explained there is a record of a Jean M. Trognot coming into the US in the 1960s and proposed that it was likely Jean-Michel or Mrs. Macron's father. Owens said that this occurred during Jean-Michel's missing years. She further stated that this may have been when Mrs. Macron and Jean-Michel went to Stanford University to participate in the Stanford prison experiment. According to Owens, this further bolstered her false and defamatory claim that the Macrons are connected to MK because Dr. Jolly West, who ran MK went to Stanford. Owens also tried to draw a connection between the television show The White Lotus, a cult in China, and her false and defamatory claims about the Macrons committing incest. The sole basis for this claim is that there was one scene involving incest in The White Lotus Season 3 and that Season 4 of the show is set to take place in Paris. Owens stated her resolve to continue repeating her false and defamatory claims about the Macrons, declaring that this series has to become my life. On September 4th, 2025, defendants released episode 233, titled I'm Back and Still Asking Questions. Sorry, Brigitte. Defendants announced the episode on X, all the places you can find it. In episode 233, Owens repeated her false and defamatory claim that Mrs. Macron is Jean-Michel and committed identity theft. Owens claimed that Jean-Michel is suing her under his new name, Brigitte Macron. She stated that this action was going to get fun, and she was actually so excited because she has the power of subpoena. On September 8th, 2025, defendants launched Season 2 of Becoming Brigitte, releasing an episode titled Becoming Brigitte, MK and the French Gold Rush. Defendants announced the episode on X, all the places you can find it, in Season 2, Episode 1. Owens repeated her false and defamatory claim that Mrs. Macron is Jean-Michel. Owens expanded on her new theory that Mrs. Macron, as Jean-Michel, participated in the Stanford prison experiment. Owens told her audience that the Sarge, i.e. the participant Owens claimed was Jean-Michel, was just 5'8". Okay? Brigitte Macron today is just above 5'6", and we know that males shrink 1 to 3 inches between the ages of 30 and 70. So this is still a very, very much a possibility. Owens went on to claim that Mrs. Macron was a Rothschild agent, and the family may have put her in the Stanford prison experiment to get gold. On September 9th, 2025, defendants released their second episode in Becoming Brigitte Season 2, titled Becoming Brigitte, the God of Amiens. Defendants announced the episode on X, places you can find it. In Season 2, Episode 2, Owens claimed that Mrs. Macron was part of the cult of Dionysus. I hope I've said that right. And was trying to dismantle the Catholic Church from within. Owens repeated the false and defamatory claim that President Macron was part of MK or a similar government mind control program. Owens told her listeners, these decisions, like who is going to be president and when, these decisions are actually made in a boardroom. Owens repeated the false and defamatory claim that Mrs. Macron is lying about her identity and committed identity theft. Owens said that Mrs. Macron does not walk or sit like a woman, and when you look at that image, you're looking at somebody that is a dude. I would say that gait in particular is quite military, and that Jean-Michel was in the military. Owens repeats and adopts Poussard's conclusion that Jean-Michel Trognot has been living under the civil birth identity of his sister, Brigitte Trognot, since at least 1986. Defendants published Owens's false and defamatory claims with actual malice, that is, with the knowledge that they were false, or with reckless disregard for the truth. And that is what separates free speech and protected opinion, is knowing they're false, knowing what you're saying is false and saying it publicly anyway. Causing harm to be done to someone's reputation. Owens published her false and defamatory statements in the series with actual knowledge that they were false, or at minimum with reckless disregard for their falsity and of the truth. Indeed, there is substantial evidence that, at an absolute minimum, Owens recklessly disregarded the truth in publishing the defamatory statements. Most egregiously, prior to the release of the series, the December retraction demand squarely addressed the central defamatory themes Owens intended to publish, providing clear and documented evidence that refuted those falsehoods. Rather than engaging with the facts in good faith, Owens willfully ignored the substance of the letter. Instead, she selectively quoted isolated phrases out of context, misleading her viewers by falsely suggesting that these excerpts constituted the entirety of the Macron's response. Most importantly, Owens informed her audience that the Macrons had not denied any of her allegations, a demonstrable and deliberate lie intended to bolster the credibility of her preconceived narrative. Her conduct reveals not only a reckless disregard for the truth, but also a calculated attempt to deceive her audience and defame the Macrons. Even setting aside the multiple retraction demands, there is overwhelming evidence of actual malice. Okay. I did see someone in the comments kind of say, in comments to the first episode, sort of said, well, why would you be trying to shut this down? Why would you be filing this if it wasn't true? And I did respond with, well, to be honest, if someone was saying all of this stuff about me and it wasn't true, I would be suing them as well. But also, I just want to point out here, the Macrons didn't actually rush to court. There were 3 requests to retract the statements. It's just a letter to say, look, this is what you're saying is not true. This is the truth. Can you please retract your statements? Most, to go to court, it's like in the UK, we've got civil procedure rules, and before you initiate lawsuits, you should put people on notice. Notice is a written letter to say, if you do not pay this, or if you do not do this, or don't cease from doing that, within a prescribed period of time for whatever it is, I will then have no choice but to issue in, court, issue proceedings against you in court. You have to put people on notice in civil claims. And a retraction is doing a similar thing. It's like, look, if you don't do this, then I'm going to pursue other legal options. If you don't stop saying things that are not true, I'm going to pursue my legal rights. Normally, only one is required to have complied with, all pre-litigation civil procedures. Certainly in the UK, you just need to send the one warning letter, and then if that's ignored, or you don't get a response, or there's not an attempt to try and work out the problem, informally, out of court, then then legal proceedings can then be pursued. Macrons did actually send not 1 but 3 retraction demands, and I think that is kind of relevant too. They did not just race off to court. So even if someone is kind of they formed their opinion that this has to be, there is some truth to it, because the Macrons are quote unquote trying to shut it down, they didn't just do that. And also, they didn't do it after the first retraction letter or the second one. They sent a third. So that's just, to me, I find that really quite important. in that context. Okay. Owens' central claim that President and Mrs. Macron fabricated their identities, engaged in incest, participated in MK Ultra, and are part of a criminal syndicate, engaged in identity theft, forgery, fraud, abuses of power, and even murder, is inherently implausible on its face. She relied on fringe conspiracy theorists and discredited figures as her primary sources while disregarding readily available public records and credible reporting that directly contradicted her narrative. Her refusal to engage with contradictory facts and her deliberate elevation of fabrications over truth demonstrate a reckless disregard for the truth. The truth is that the defendants continued publishing Owens's claims, despite knowing they were false, because they did not think the Macrons had any legal recourse. Though she dared them to file this action, which is what I said, Owens later admitted to Tucker Carlson that she didn't even know how they could sue. Even the filing of this action did not slow defendants down. Owens has mentioned the Macrons in every podcast episode she has made between July 23rd, 2025 and September 9th, 2025, and in various episodes since then. For instance, in episode 238 that aired on September the 18th, 2025, Owens suggested that the Macrons were part of a conspiracy to try and distract Owens from looking into Charlie Kirk's murder and assassination, simply because the Macrons' counsel participated in a BBC podcast about the case 8 days after Kirk's death. Owens admitted that she chooses which stories to pursue based on which topics people claim are false. For example, Owens told Tucker Carlson that what they're getting very angry about, something that seems so simple, is probably where you should press your thumb the hardest. But there is this common thread that it brings you back to Paris every time, whether you're talking about Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, talking about Emmanuel Macron, and Brigitte. Owens's repetition, promotion, and endorsement of an inherently improbable conspiracy theory is evidence of actual malice. Although the indisputable facts all point to the conclusion that President and Mrs. Macron have not lied about their identities or history, Owens remains dead set on creating a media circus to build her viewership and wealth by hawking false and inherently improbable and defamatory claims about the Macrons, including identity theft, incest, and mind control, deeply damaging the Macrons' reputations. Since the Macrons filed this action, Owens has expanded her inherently unreliable claims, stating that an unfavorable outcome in this lawsuit would be due to corruption because, Hunter Biden kind of notoriously said, like we control the courts in Delaware. Owens' sources are facially unreliable. It is baffling that Owens would stake her entire professional reputation on the word of a so-called clairvoyant, Roy, and an amateur detective, Ray. Worse still, Owens chose to repeat and republish their accusations despite Ray and Roy having been found liable for defamation by a French court regarding those very claims. Furthermore, relying on Xavier Poussard, the prior writer for Fait et Document, a newsletter known for its anti-Semitism and conspiracy theories, further discredits these facially ridiculous accusations. Not only are Ray and Roy facially unreliable, but they also display ill will towards the Macrons. Indeed, Ray attempted to influence French policy with these claims, as she stated to Roy that her evidence of the First Lady's transition was in a sealed envelope deposited with a lawyer whose name is well known and would be made public the day vaccines are made obligatory. Roy is biased against President Macron due to an incident where she claims she was not well treated during a call to the Élysée Palace. This incident allegedly occurred just after President Macron's 2017 election. Roy contacted the palace after experiencing a premonition that terror groups were going to attack a French nuclear power station, but was disbelieved for obvious reasons. Indeed, this is not the first unfounded rumour about the Macrons Roy has spread on her YouTube channel. She has often falsely claimed that President Macron is gay, as well as other rumours about the Macrons' private lives. Okay. Owens' political bias against President and Mrs. Macron was evident during her July 1st, 2024 episode of Candace, when she stated she does not know how long Brigitte Macron is going to be leading the country behind her husband, because Marine Le Pen's far-right group was expected to win, which Owens found extremely promising. Owens further claimed Macron has no power, Brigitte has been running the show. This political bias, too, is circumstantial evidence of Owens's actual malice, especially where she has read and ignored reliable sources debunking these falsehoods. Owens has repeatedly demonstrated her ill will and disdain towards the Macrons, which she used to bolster her false claims. For example, Owens repeated that these people are satanic and described the Macrons as her enemies. Owens stated that she counted the Macrons among the perverts that run the world, and called them sick and disgusting, saying she is fully prepared to take on this battle on behalf of the entire world. On behalf of the entire world, she will see the Macrons in court. Owens reiterated that she was on a mission to expose the Macrons as sickos, and that she wanted to get to the part where she gets to depose the Macrons and to request documents and to request emails and to request conversations between the Macrons and Mimi Marchand. Owens then dared the Macrons, "What are you going to do?" "Oh my God, no. What are you going to do next? Sue me some more. Sue me harder. I'm looking forward to this." Owens has openly demonstrated her ill will and retaliatory intent towards the Macrons, further evidencing actual malice. In interviews with multiple podcasters, Owens admitted that she initially intended to release only a single episode of the series. However, upon receiving the December retraction demand, which directly refuted her false claims, Owens responded not by reassessing the accuracy of her reporting, but by escalating her defamatory campaign. She stated, "Now we're doing a whole series because how dare you," making clear that the series was motivated by her personal animus rather than any legitimate journalistic purpose. She further warned that if the Macrons were going to contact her again regarding her false accusations, she would retaliate by producing a second season. These statements reflect a deliberate intent to harm, not a good faith effort to report the truth. Owens has continued to demonstrate her retaliatory intent by stating, "We're not going to shut up. You're not going to bully us. Frankly, I find this all to be irresistible and delicious. The discovery alone is going to be out of this world." Owens stated that she is just the kind of person that digs her heels and is totally committed now to doing so much more on both Emmanuel and Brigitte, so stay tuned. Indeed, on September the 8th, 2025, Owens launched Season 2 of the series. Owens intentionally disregarded key sources that have forcefully, publicly, and repeatedly debunked her dubious claims. Owens admitted that she reviewed reliable sources debunking the conspiracy. Indeed, Owens learned about the allegation from the 2021 Daily Mail debunking article. That article provided substantial evidence of the probable falsity of the allegations. Owens also received 3 retraction demand letters from the Macrons, which explicitly stated that her claims were false and included evidence to support this. Owens' intentional disregard of these sources in favor of her preconceived narrative is evidence of actual malice. There is no doubt that Owens had a preconceived storyline before she began her reporting. In March 2024, she told the world she was staking her entire reputation on Mrs. Macron being a man. Owens made these false accusations because they supported that preconceived storyline, despite the inherent improbability of her accusations and the unreliability of her sources made even more ludicrous when compared to the credibility of the sources debunking her assertions. This is evident in Owens's refusal to provide her audience with evidence that contradicts her claim, and her knowingly false denial that such evidence exists. Owens was also financially motivated to create a scandal. The series was aggressively monetized and used to solicit donations, promote subscriptions, and elevate her personal brand. Her conduct reveals a clear motive to generate controversy for financial and reputational gain. She will say anything, regardless of how outrageous or unfounded, to attract attention, build her platform, and achieve notoriety. After being fired from the Daily Wire, Owens needed to produce the kind of sensational content that would ignite her followers to contribute financially. Currently, Owens' show appears to rely heavily on funding from audiences and advertisers supportive of her false claims about the Macron. Owens has tricked fans into believing she is on a righteous mission rather than a merely profitable one, as evidenced by the merchandise she sells on CandaceOwens.com. She has monetized the conspiracy theory label and profited from her lies about the Macrons. $60 for a cup. In Owens' September 18, 2024 appearance on Piers Morgan Uncensored, she flatly admitted that she relies on fan donations to keep her podcast up and running since being demonetized by YouTube. A week earlier, she had claimed in a September 11, 2024 X post that YouTube demonetized her account because she was exposing the global ring of satanic pedophiles, currently through the Macron conspiracy theory. In reality, YouTube had demonetized Owens' account for violating its hate speech policies. Owens' financial motives for publishing the series are clear because she repeatedly solicited donations in every episode. Although YouTube has monetized her channel once again, she has publicly stated that her goal is to become financially independent from the platform. To that end, defendants have rebuilt Owens' website to host content that she knows would be removed or demonetized under YouTube's content moderation policies. Indeed, one episode of the series is dubbed "Too Hot for YouTube" on Owens' website. In every episode of the series, Owens asks her audience to support her work financially. She pairs these requests with assertions that she is engaged in a mission to reveal the truth and that efforts to hold her accountable are part of a broader attempt to suppress free speech and religion. Owens characterizes criticism and fact-checking of her claims as censorship and attacks on her religious beliefs. These appeals reinforce her false narrative and encourage her audience to financially support her despite the lack of credible evidence to substantiate the defamatory claims she promotes. Her financial incentive and motive to make the defamatory accusations further prove actual malice. Since the Macrons filed this action, Owens has continued to monetize her false claims. Owens immediately restocked her Man of the Year shirt featuring Mrs. Macron and noted she hoped the Macrons would add an addendum that says they sold out again! ! Oh. The next day, defendants posted a link to the shirts on X. Time magazine mentions Owens' sale of the shirts in an article, which Owens said was simply iconic, before encouraging her viewers to purchase a shirt from her website. In addition to selling merchandise to profit off her lies, Owens is also encouraging viewers to financially support her through this lawsuit by asking them to subscribe, sign up for her products, and send donations to cover her legal fees. Owens told her viewers, "These lawyer fees don't just just don't go away, and noted that she has seen this definitely an uptick in donations. People that are like, take our money. We want to help you fight this case. In fact, despite Owens' claim that the Macrons will fake kill Brigitte before discovery, she still told her fans that obviously supporting us, signing up on the website, all of those things is how you can support us. Most recently, Owens started selling shirts and hats to fund this action. Owens told her audience that she got an estimate this weekend from a legal team and it's going to cost her millions. Owens claimed that she could not afford her defense, so she would be selling #FreeEmmanuel shirts and hats to pay her legal team. Taken together, Owens' deliberate misrepresentation and manufacturing of evidence, the inherent improbability of her accusations, her reliance on facially unreliable sources, her bias, her ill will, her intentional disregard of reliable sources, her preconceived storyline, her financial incentive, and her refusal to retract in the face of contradictory evidence are clear and convincing evidence of actual malice. Oh my God, I cannot believe I'm like, in total, 3.5 hours into going through reading this, and we're only halfway through. Okay. Others amplified and republished Owens' false and defamatory statements, increasing their global audience and the reputational and emotional harm to the Macrons. So where are we at? We're at like 1 minute and 35. So I'll do another 25 minutes and then stop there and move on to part 3 tomorrow, episode 3. Owens continued promoting her false claims after the conclusion of the series. On February 21st, 2025, Owens again accused Mrs. Macron of lying about her identity and grooming President Macron. Then, egging on the Macrons, Owens said, "Where's your lawsuit? Where's your lawsuit, Brigitte? When are you going to drop it?" Owens' false claims were picked up by other influential podcasters after the conclusion of the series. This included Joe Rogan, who is widely accepted as the most popular broadcaster in the world. Currently, his podcast, Joe Rogan Experience, has over 20 million subscribers on YouTube. It is also available on various places. Rogan has 19.9 million followers on Instagram and 15.4 million followers on X. Joe Rogan Experience was ranked the #1 podcast in the United States as of Q4 2024, according to Edison Research. On March 22nd, 2025, Rogan discussed the series on the Joe Rogan Experience. Rogan says, "Macron's a man? Yeah, Brigitte Macron's a man. Owens got me hook, line, and sinker." The March 22nd episode has more than 720,000 views. On April 3rd, 2025, Rogan discussed Owens' popularity on YouTube. Rogan stated, "Candace Owens' show. It's on YouTube. It's doing better numbers than any of the shows on cable news. It's phenomenal. She can't be stopped." Rogan highlighted the series, stating she's got a 6-hour presentation on how Brigitte Macron is a man. "I think she's right." In support of that claim, Rogan stated Owens would be getting sued right now instead of trying to bribe her. Instead of trying to give her money to shut the fuck up, they would sue her. Now, I don't know if Candace Owens has claimed that the Macrons have offered her money at all. So I don't know don't personally know where Joe Rogan got that from, but the very next paragraph, the Macrons have never offered Owens any type of bribe or money settlement to stop speaking about them. Owens endorsed and repeated Rogan's statements by playing the clip from his April 3rd episode on the April 7th episode of Candace. Owens stated he is the biggest podcaster in the world. Owens did not refute the false claim that the Macrons tried to bribe her. Instead, she said, he is not lying. There is so much that's happening in France right now that I actually said to my team, we're going to have to do a Becoming Brigitte season 2. The updates that we have in that case, what has come out since, and once again, the things that the mainstream media are completely neglecting to cover. Owens continued, I have some stories to tell you that I have had to keep my mouth shut about. I really want to tell you guys, and I really am going to tell you eventually, but I'm thinking we're going to have to do a season 2 of Becoming Brigitte. On February 19th, 2025, comedians Tom Segura and Christina Pazitsky discussed Owens on their podcast Your Mum's House. Your Mum's House has 2.13 million subscribers on YouTube and 130,000 followers on X. Segura has 685,000 subscribers on YouTube and 967,000 followers on X. Pazitsky has 222,000 subscribers on YouTube and 265,400 followers on X. Your Mum's House is available at various places. The February 19th episode has garnered over 500,000 views, and the March 5th episode has surpassed 400,000 views on YouTube alone. Pazitsky stated, the series is huge and Owens has a ton of evidence. Pazitsky repeated that Owens is staking her career on the fact that Brigitte Macron, the First Lady of France, is actually a man. Pazitsky repeated the false claim that Mrs. Macron is actually Jean-Michel. Excuse me. When Segura asked why this is important, Pazitsky summed up Owens' overarching theory that it's not just that this woman is a man. The implications for this being if this really is a man who transitioned to a woman, is because having a relationship with a 14-year-old boy is completely inappropriate and illegal and wrong. Secondly, in the government, they're protecting paedophiles because, she believes that this is a paedophile culture and they're protecting paedophiles. There's also links to the Rothschild family. Brigitte Macron is actually a Rothschild, which is like the biggest banking company in France I know, and they're protecting each other's interests. There's incest, there's all kinds of gross things, satanic cults. In a subsequent episode on March 5th, 2025, Segura and Pazitsky discussed Owens' pivotal role in making the false claims about the Macrons global. Segura said, Owens is the leader in this story. Pazitsky agreed, saying, this is Candace Owens' big moment right now. She has exposed Brigitte Macron. Pazitsky repeated the false claim that the Macrons are not even trying to call Owens out on the false claims. On March 5th, 2025, just to go back there actually, this episode on March 5th, by this point there had actually been 2 retraction letters sent. There was a December and then there was a February one that had been sent. So when they say the Macrons are not even trying to call Owens out on the false claims, 2 retraction letters had been sent at that point. And I believe Candace Owens was even talking about them as well, that she'd received them. So, yeah. On March 5th, 2025, Owens appeared on This Past Weekend with Theo Von to discuss the series. Theo Von is a popular comedian and podcaster. He has over 4 million subscribers on YouTube, 1.5 million followers on X, and 8 million followers on Instagram. Von's podcast is available on various places. As of Q4 2024, it was ranked number 5 in the United States, according to the Edison Research. His episode with Owens has 3.4 million views on YouTube alone. Oh, my throat is starting to just give up. In her discussion with Von, Owens claimed that 1000% Mrs. Macron was born a man, lived as a man for 30 years, and then transitioned at some time in the 80s. One asked Owens whether she was concerned about being sued for her statements, and she replied, "I welcomed the lawsuit. I only presented the facts." In the same clip, Owens falsely stated that President Macron was 14 and Mrs. Macron was 40 when the couple met, and they don't deny that. Something Owens has repeatedly recognised the Macrons do refute. On March 14th, 2025, Tucker Carlson hosted Clayton Morris on The Tucker Carlson Show. The Tucker Carlson Network is a streaming platform launched by Tucker Carlson in December 2023 following his departure from Fox News. TCN broadcasts Carlson's podcast, The Tucker Carlson Show, which can be viewed on Tucker Carlson's website and various other places. Tucker Carlson has 4.02 million subscribers on YouTube, 16.3 million followers on X, and 4.5 million followers on Instagram. His episode with Morris has 1 million views on YouTube alone. During the episode, Morris gave Owens full credit for really opening the story up from the French journalist who first broke it. Morris summarised Owens' reporting on Mrs. Macron, stating, "He's a groomer. Emmanuel Macron was a child, and this man takes him under his wing and is a groomer, uses the identity of another human being. Brigitte Macron is a man who groomed Emmanuel Macron." Morris went on to discuss the mechanism protecting these people involved in child sex trafficking, and stated that when you have people like Brigitte Macron, who are like groomers of children, it makes sense that they would be protected. Carlson agreed. These elite circles, it's incredibly disgusting. Owens reported on Carlson's coverage of her claims. She played a clip of Carlson and Morris discussing the series, fully endorsing and repeating the statements, stating, "That's a fact." Owens noted that the series was going viral worldwide and that the entire world who has watched this series is embracing it. In that same episode, Owens said, "I was only going to do one episode on Brigitte, and I met with Xavier Poussard and did that interview with him. I was only going to do one episode. And then my pregnant butt waddled outside, and there was a 100-page legal letter being served to me, and I was like, game on, let's go to war." Owens told her audience, "When I bring something to you, I hope you have enough trust to know that I would never just say stuff. Like, I wouldn't just say stuff. I don't just say stuff. And that's why I staked my entire professional career on the Becoming Brigitte series." On April 3rd, 2025, Owens discussed President Macron with Ian Carroll, who hosts the Ian Carroll Show on YouTube, on an episode of Candace. Ian Carroll has 316,000 subscribers on YouTube, 1.2 million followers on X, 653,000 followers on Instagram, and 1.7 million followers on TikTok. Carroll's April 3rd appearance on Candace has more than 1.3 million views. Owens stated, "Emmanuel Macron was an actor. He had no power. Anyone who has watched my Brigitte Macron series walks away and understands that he has never been in control." On April 7th, 2025, Owens appeared on Keeping It Real with Gillian Michaels, saying she only stuck to the facts on the series. I love Gillian Michaels. I love her exercise routine and her approach to exercise. She's great. Gillian Michaels is a popular reality star and podcaster. Michaels has more than 1.5 million followers on Instagram and 1.6 million followers on X. Her podcast has over 550,000 subscribers on YouTube. It is also available in a variety of places. Michael's April 7th episode with Owens has over 352,000 views. On the podcast with Michaels, Owens boasted that Joe Rogan was fully convinced of her claims after 2 episodes. Owens then repeated her claims to Michaels, starting by exaggerating the Macron's age difference, saying President Macron was a 14-year-old boy and Mrs. Macron was a 45-year-old woman. Owens then described her claims, saying Mrs. Macron's just a dude. She transitioned when she was in her early 30s, became a teacher, got the Adam's apple surgery, met Macron. I mean, everything they told you about this woman was just fictitious. And it was made up because she's connected to a tremendous amount of power in France. Owens repeated that Mrs. Macron took on somebody else's identity. Owens then stated President Macron was 14 and Mrs. Macron was 40, contradicting her earlier false claim, stating it's statutory rape until the end of this year. Brigitte Macron could be tried for this, and that's why they're freaking out. They're arresting journalists, are doing all this stuff because it's true. Sorry, just check it's right. Okay. Owens told Michaels that she decided to punish the Macrons for their December retraction demand, saying, I was only going to do one episode, and I said, now we're doing a whole series because how dare you. Owens discussed the immense popularity of the series and called it the most viral thing we've ever done. Owens leaned into the implication that the Macrons might try to physically harm her for her false claims, in an exchange where Michaels stated, I'm a little worried about you. Are you worried about you? Owens stated, I know, I just let God worry about me. My husband and I have just dedicated ourselves to the truth. Michaels replied, I appreciate your faith in God, but maybe a really good security service? Owens stated, I think it's an act of vanity, security. I mean, like, they shot JFK in a moving vehicle. If they want you, they're going to get you. You know, they're going to get you. Let's see. Okay. On April 7th, 2025, Owens also appeared on the Howie Mandel Does Stuff podcast and spoke about Mrs. Macron. Howie Mandel is a Canadian comedian, actor, and television personality. He hosted the game show Deal or No Deal and has been judged on America's Got Talent since 2010. Mandel's podcast, Howie Mandel Does Stuff, has more than 286 subscribers on YouTube. It is also available in a variety of places. Mandel has 1.2 million followers on Instagram and over 747,000 followers on X. Mandel hosts a podcast with his daughter and co-host Jacqueline Schultz. Schultz has 104,000 followers on Instagram. The April 7th episode with Owens has more than 430,000 views. Owens responded 100% when asked if Mrs. Macron had a penis. Owens again boasted that Rogan was convinced of her claims about Mrs. Macron after 2 episodes of the series. Owens repeated that Mrs. Macron lived as Jean-Michel before she transitioned and that there are only 2 photos from her past. Mandel asked, did you get offered money, really? Owens responded, I got threatened first. Owens falsely claimed that she hadn't done anything and it hadn't even come out before the Macrons sent the December retraction demand. Mandel pressed Owens on whether she was actually offered money, and she begrudgingly admitted she was not. Owens said again that it was only supposed to be 1 episode. Then I got this 100-page letter, and then when I got this 100-page letter, I said, now we're doing a whole series. Owens then explained her central thesis to Mandel's audience, stating at the heart of the Macron thing, there's an entire paedophile nebula that's around him. People who have worked for him that just keep getting arrested for child paedophilia. Every Elysee Palace scandal regarding pedophilia that's happened since he's been in office, something's not right there. Owens then again falsely stated that Macron was 14 years old, Brigitte was 40. On April 26, 2025, Owens appeared on The Tim Dillon Show. Tim Dillon is an American stand-up comedian, podcaster, and actor. His podcast, The Tim Dillon Show, has more than 847,000 subscribers on YouTube. various places. You can see his podcast. Right, Dylan has over 878,500 followers on X and over 926,000 followers on Instagram. His April 26th episode with Owens has surpassed 1.5 million views. Tim Dillon started the show by telling Owens that he was asked about the series while checking into a hotel and said it has blown up. Owens replied, "Oh, everywhere. I mean, it's the most international thing I've ever done." Owens again displayed her ill will and bias against the Macrons, stating, "The funny thing is, if Emmanuel Macron had not sent me that letter threat, we were only going to do one episode." Oh my God, it's like I was so angry. He had the audacity to send a server processor to Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm a little testy when I'm pregnant. I'll give you that, but someone is going to knock on my front door and say the president of France says you're not allowed to speak or else. So yeah, it's a challenge. I was like, okay, like now we're really doing this thing. I already knew he married a dude, but now we're really doing this thing. To give credence to her false reporting, Owens continued, and we just poured hours and hours and hours into just more research, taking it on. Owens lied that the Macrons never provided her with evidence that her claims were false. She said, "In order to reach that actual malice standard, you have to show that we acted in reckless disregard for the truth. You refused to say the truth, and it was just this pompous 100-page, we don't have to answer whether or not Brigitte is a woman or a man." As Owens knew, the December retraction demand did in fact deny and disprove that Mrs. Macron was a man. Owens pretended to have additional evidence to prove her false claims, stating, "And it's so much crazier because there's stuff that I can't say on record just yet. I'll tell you off camera, but it's gotten even crazier." Owens again lied about the age difference between the Macrons, saying he's 14, Mrs. Macron is 40. Soon after, Owens went even further, saying it's actually 48 and 14. Dillon responded, "It's illegal." Owens repeated that Mrs. Macron engaged in identity theft. Owens further demonstrated her ill will towards the Macrons, stating, "Their lawyers are still calling my lawyers. They still asked for us to take down the series because they were afraid when Joe Rogan mentioned it recently. So they made another phone call and were basically like, we could still see you in the future, but maybe you just want to take it down. Stop with these phone calls. As I said to my lawyer, if they call again, we're doing a season 2 because I left a lot on the table." Dillon discussed MKUltra and similar programs with Owens describing them as mind-controlled programs that were in America. They were all over the place, and these were programs that were utilized to turn, people into essentially slaves that could be programmed to do things, whether it was assassinate someone and not remember why or who told you to do it, right? Or be a sex slave, or perhaps in a Manchurian candidate fashion, run the government, run a country. Owens responded, "That is who Emmanuel Macron is." Owens supported this with false claims that President Macron's test scores were faked, that he did not perform well at Rothschild Bank, and that he was like a protected Rothschild, and they needed to create this fake resume for him to make people think he was a genius. Owens said that this is what a Manchurian candidate would look like. These people tend to always be in drama classes. Right. Owens repeated her theory that Mrs. Macron is not only a man who molested President Macron, but also his blood relative. She stated, "My sense is Mrs. Macron is the missing uncle whose name is Jean-Michel, who was the godfather when Emmanuel Macron got his first communion at school, who's just missing." Dillon summed up Owens's claim, stating, "So if it's your belief that you've got Emmanuel Macron who goes through this program, he's selected at a very young age to basically be some type of Manchurian candidate. And then at some point, Jean-Michel Trogneux becomes Brigitte, who then becomes a teacher." Owens responded, yeah, to further groom. He was groomed by Brigitte. There's no question. And I'm going to stop there because we are now coming up to 2 hours. All right, guys. So same time again tomorrow for episode 3. It's getting interesting now, though, isn't it? Thanks for sticking by and watching all of this and supporting me. If you could like and subscribe, that would really help my channel. All right, guys, take care. And I will be still doing the unsealed attachments for the Lively case for those who follow that case. I will do an episode of that tomorrow too.